Hey there, Skullheads. I'm Snags.
And I'm Ol Silky.
And we are caught in a dream tonight. We're going to tell you some strange tales of the Alice Cooper group.
Yes.
So get ready.
Episode 83, kids.
Yeah.
Source
Do you want to go
over the Spotify accolades for this year?
Oh, sure. Show? Yeah. A little. We got to have our non-related banter at the beginning. That's a podcast staple. Yeah. All right. So, oh, you mean for the show?
Yeah, like we're in 12 countries, ladies and
did you take notes on that?
No, I just remembered that one, and
okay.
we're up like 58% in followers.
Yeah, we got one of those year-end wraps that you get from Spotify, and it had some stats. I'm going to pull it up and we'll read through some stats. Silky just dropped a couple there because we know you guys are dying to know.
How's the show doing?
How's the show doing? Yeah, we know you don't tune into this because you care about Led Zeppelin and Iron Maiden and Rancid and The Clash and The Stooges. We know you really just care about us and our show.
Yeah.
Because it's really all about us, not you. And not these interesting artists that we profile. All right, here we go. Fans were really loving your show in 2024. You took it to a whole new level this year. We gained 53% in followers.
Oh, there it is, 53.
Yeah, man, look at that.
That's craziness.
Give it up for your new fans. 81% of your listeners, yes, discovered you this year. So we got a bunch of new fans this year. Your fans have a clear favorite. All right, the top episode of the year was Walking Through the Fire, an interview with Grin Cynic. So shout out to those cats. They obviously pimped it. They pimped that shit on social media, which
they must have. And I did thank them with a photo of that stat from
and you know, that's just guest manners. You guest on a podcast, you pimp that shit on social media, you know.
Yeah.
Shouldn't have to fucking nag you afterwards multiple times in private messages. Not that we would ever do that.
We've had a couple guests that just didn't bother, and I'm like, damn, man, really?
You gonna do that?
That's all good.
The Grin Cynic episode was streamed 210% more than the average episode.
That's huge.
Ever wondered who your audience is? Let's break it down. Listeners by age. 18 to 24. The 18 to 24 demographic grew the most. So we're getting some younger cats checking out the podcast these two old fuckers are doing.
Yeah.
That our 18 to 24 demographic grew by 66%.
That's crazy.
Yeah. Where in the world have you been? In 2024, your show traveled the globe. We were streamed in 12 countries. United States was the top country. America. Our fans have great taste, obviously. Other than our show, our fans also listen to Last Podcast on the Left, The Joe Rogan Experience. I'm telling you, we're always neck and neck with that fucker. I don't even know who he is.
No, but I noticed that we're mentioned, and then another show, and then Joe Rogan. So
yeah.
You know,
and then
that's just interesting to me.
So the other two podcasts that are there's three more podcasts. So our listeners also listen to Last Podcast on the Left, some guy named Joe Rogan, the Leo and Danny Show. That sounds kind of like us.
Yeah, we're
the Leo and Danny Show, Disgraceland, and Gil's Arena. Our listeners, as far as music goes, this should not be a big surprise. They mostly listen to classic rock, metal, and psychedelic rock.
That's all right.
And then their audiobook genres. This is a surprise. Parenting and relationships. This must be the influence of when your kid comes in yammers every episode.
Oh, maybe.
Religion and spirituality. That's a mystery. We're both like avowed atheists.
Wow.
Biography and memoir. I get that. We're always doing bios.
We worship the Lord and Savior.
Oh, that's true. We are religious. Yeah, we worship Lemmy. Shout out to your biggest fans, keeping you at the top of the game. We're a top 10 show for at least 70 fans. This means this, yeah.
That's good. Let's get started though.
No. We're gonna see this through. We're a top 5.
What else is there to see? Go ahead.
You're so fucking impatient. You got to trust me. I got shit.
I just wanted to hear the. Go ahead. Go.
We're a top 5 show for 61 fans, and we are the number 1 show for 35 fans. There's 35 idiots out there who wear their favorite podcast.
That's fantastic.
Now, if you hear the blending in the background, that's my wife making a shake. Hey, our top fans listen to us 1.8 times more than our other listeners. Let's see here. That's it. Okay, now you know our stats.
For God's sakes.
Yeah, you're Alice the one that Cooper. Fucking brought it up. Alice Cooper Group, ladies and gentlemen. So some of the source material, which we'll be linking in the click pit for this, it's a documentary called Super Duper Alice Cooper. It's on YouTube. It's free. We'll link that. And then there's a great book that we both read called Snakes, Guillotines, Electric Chairs, My Adventures in the Alice Cooper Group, written by Alice Cooper Group co-founder Dennis Dunaway, the bass player.
Yeah.
And it's fucking phenomenal.
I just finished that book about an hour ago.
This fucker just finished it right before we
really excellent.
I want to start, though, by us both sharing our memories of how we first discovered Alice Cooper. You want me to go first?
Sure, go ahead.
All right, so me and my friend Arthur, I've got two best friends who I grew up with. Arthur, I've known him since I was fucking 6, and then this idiot co-host here, who I've known since I was probably 15.
15,
yeah. So, me and Arthur, we used to walk to the mall during the summer. We would just go wild, and we would. One of the things we would do is walk to the mall nearby, and it was about a 20-minute walk. And we're just walking. This is early 80s. We're walking along on the sidewalk, and we see somebody left a bunch of stuff out. You know how people leave stuff in front of their house, and it's not really trash. It's shit they don't want anymore, and they'll leave it in a box. So there was a box that had some 8-track cassettes in it. And Arthur's stepdad had an 8-track player at home, and we see this one cassette with this red label on it with a fucking snake. It just looked badass.
Nice.
It says Killer.
Killer.
And Alice Cooper, Killer. And we were like, that looks fucking cool as shit. No idea what it is, but that looks cool. Right. So Arthur's the one who had the 8-track. He snagged it. And he ended up becoming an obsessed Alice Cooper fan. He ended up going to the record store and buying all the albums. And from his influence, I bought Alice Cooper Greatest Hits, which was basically the greatest hits of the Alice Cooper Group that was released after they...
Really good record.
Yeah, man. It's solid.
Sadly, they don't have much from Muscle of Love, but...
Which, we'll get to that. That's that might be my favorite album. But anyways, then me and Arthur went and saw Alice. At the time we were getting into him, he was all dealing with his drug rehab thing. And a year or two later, he does this big comeback tour. I guess it was 1985. And he comes to Atlanta to play at the Civic Center, and the Vinnie Vincent Invasion is opening.
Oh, that would have been 86 on the Constrictor album.
Yeah, that was his big comeback tour.
He had
Yeah.
those two muscle dudes playing guitar with him.
Yeah, yeah. And Kane something.
Yeah.
And so oh shit, Alice Cooper's coming to town, because when we got into him and we were reading up on him, you didn't have Wikipedia back then, but people would tell you, or you'd find out, he's kind of washed up now. Oh, and a year or two later, he's back. We were like, oh shit, we got to go. So that was cool. Got to see him get his head chopped off in the guillotine and all that shit. Mm-hmm. So when did you first discover Alice Cooper? Do you remember?
So my childhood, if you watch like Dazed and Confused, those kids were my mother. So I was exposed to a lot of those classic, just classic rock albums as they came out. Now I was only 3, 4, 5, but those records would come into the house and be played 24/7. It was a party house. The kids in the neighborhood would come over, the older kids, and they'd all smoke pot and party. And so, you take an album like Rocks or Rock and Roll Over 1976. I heard those records as they were brand new, and watched everyone getting stoned and blazed out. And then like waking up on the floor in my room because somebody wanted to use my bed. So, So Alice Cooper, I remember specifically like $1 Billion Babies and Muscle Love, but those would have been older. Those would have been older records, because those, I think they were wrapped up by 74, but I remember Love It to Death the most, playing Ballad of Dwight Fry and I'm 18. I always wanted to be 18. But I honestly, I would say like 75, 76, I really became aware of Elvis Presley. And then from there, it was just raiding my mom's records.
Right.
And I remember
Alice Cooper was a part of that.
Yeah. Specifically Love It to Death, and $1 Billion Babies. I remember those. And really, Pretty's for You. I believe she did have that. And I used to look at that painting album cover. But, I'm sure she had the other.
That was a controversial album cover, because his illustration is some chick lifting her dress.
Yeah, she's raising her dress up.
Yeah, a little cartoon chick showing her panties, and that was banned at the stores and shit. People went nuts.
Like Leonardo da Vinci can have, or whoever, one of the Michelangelo, these just bare-breasted women with their arms chopped off. That's okay.
Yeah. The arms weren't originally chopped off. They fell off over time.
Oh, were they? I thought they were.
No, it wasn't a stylistic thing.
Well, I just thought they weren't completed, but anyway.
Oh, maybe. Who knows? We're not experts in fine art, that's for sure.
Yeah. Well, we are, but they haven't caught up with us.
Yeah. We just don't tell people how awesome we are in that front.
How artistic we are.
We'll be doing the fucking Picasso episode next week. Mm-hmm. So the Alice Cooper group, this episode is focused on specifically the Alice Cooper group, because originally it was a band. They formed in 1964. Vince Fernier, aka Alice Cooper, Dennis Dunaway, Glenn Buxton, they're all going to high school together.
Yeah.
I think Michael Bruce might have been in the same high school. He was the second rhythm guitar player they got.
After Tatum, right?
Yeah. He replaced John Tatum. But for sure, Vince and Glenn and Dennis are all in high school. And Vince and Dennis are track stars. So they're athletes. Yeah, not the same status as being on the football team, but you're a little bit of a jock. You go out and they would do this cross country meets and stuff. Glenn was just a freak. He was just this freak who would sit in the back of the class and make smart ass remarks.
Mm-hmm.
The Beatles come out, all these bands from this era, you know, the Beatles is the changing pivotal moment. It's just amazing.
Sure.
Go back and listen to our 3 Beatles episodes again, because it's just their influence. You can't overstate it. Every one of these bio books, oh, then the Beatles came out and blah, blah, blah. Right. So they get inspired by the Beatles. They do a little Beatles parody thing at a school talent show where there's Beatles songs, but they change the lyrics so it's about being on the track team. And it's Alice and Dennis and I can't remember if Glenn was in on that or not. There's a couple real musicians in there.
They tracked Glenn down. He was not really involved in school anything, but he had a guitar, and Dennis goes to his house to ask him to play guitar for this thing that was coming up in their school, and he was like, "Yeah, okay," and really kind of taught Dennis how to play.
So Glenn wasn't in that initial Beatles tribute thing. He was part of that.
Yeah,
I wasn't remembering clearly on that, but yeah. So, and there were a couple other guys involved, but after that, they noticed they're getting a lot of attention, more attention from girls than just being on the track team. So they decided to start a real band, and they kept Glenn from that, and then they found John Spear, who was a drummer, and John Tatum to play rhythm guitar, and they started this band called the Earwigs, and which is basically some kind of desert insect, and it crawls in your ear. It's kind of creepy, you know, these
like
things
like a centipede or a millipede.
Yeah, something. And apparently they crawl in your ears, and
terrible.
So they're already starting out with this kind of creepy vibe, but it's like, you know, it's like the Beatles, but it's a creepy insect instead, the Earwigs. And they started playing gigs and started gigging around town. And Alice learned how to play harmonica, so it was kind of a bluesy thing. They ended up being huge fans of the Yardbirds.
Yeah.
And they eventually, and somewhere along the way, Michael Bruce, who became a real integral part of the Alice Cooper group. He was one of the main songwriters. A lot of those early hits, including the lyrics, were written by Michael Bruce.
Oh, Michael, yeah.
Yeah. But somewhere along the way, he replaces John Tatum. Neil Smith, the drummer, didn't replace John Spear until after they moved to LA. So we'll get to that. But they loved the Yardbirds. So they were, obviously, that when they're gigging in these clubs as the Earwigs, they are doing mostly covers, and I think it was Michael who started convincing them, "Hey, man, we got to start writing our own songs."
Yeah,
but they learned every fucking Yardbirds song because they loved the Yardbirds. They end up opening for the Yardbirds. Somewhere along the way, they changed their name to the Spiders. So I don't know if they were the Spiders when they were opening for the Yardbirds, but they end up opening for the Yardbirds, and in their minds, they're like, "Oh, we love the Yardbirds so much. As a tribute to them, when we open, let's play all Yardbirds songs. That'll be awesome."
Oh my God!
And so they play all.
You would get killed if you pulled that shit now.
I know, and so they play all the Yardbirds songs, and then the Yardbirds come out and play the same songs over again. And afterwards, they were like, they go up to Keith Relf and they're like, "Yeah, what do you think, man? Wasn't that cool?" And he goes, "Yeah, nobody's ever done that before." Yeah. It's like, and the Yardbirds had this hot new guitar player named Jeff Beck, and they were like, "Oh man, your guitar player is awesome." And Keith Relf is like, "Yeah, you should have heard the last guy we had, this guy named Eric Clapton. He was great." And this is before Cream.
Jimmy Page is probably playing bass.
He was by the next time they met him.
The
It was
next
the
time,
next
yeah.
time. Next time around, Jimmy Page is on bass. Yeah.
One thing I wanted to add is Dennis really, even at that high school talent show that they did, they really formed a pact at that point. Let's be in a band, and Dennis, right from the start, really wanted that theatrical thing, and I always thought that Alice Cooper, when he went, and did Welcome to My Nightmare, that started his theatrical thing. But
no, they were theatrical
no,
from the
like from
start.
day
Yeah.
one. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Even
just,
in the clubs, they would just whatever they could find, they'd make it into a prop.
props
Yeah.
and trash the stage.
Yeah.
Which realistically, back in the day, we threw green beans out into a crowd.
Yeah,
To
so one of we didn't tell that story we did a podcast recently telling crazy stories from our lives, and we covered some of our performance art shit from when we were young and stupid. But we did this one routine. We come out and we would open for bands doing this stuff. We come out and we're dressed in trash bags. So that's all we're wearing. Well, I mean, we had shorts on underneath, but all you can see is our legs sticking out of these trash bags, and our head sticking out of the top of the trash bags. Our arms are sticking out of the side, and we were singing "God Save the Queen," I think, by Sex Pistols, and throwing green beans at the crowd. So we had these bags of raw green beans.
I mean, we green beaned the shit out of the Point.
Yeah, it was called the Point. Yeah, it was a club that Pearl Jam played later on.
A lot of people found that humorous, but I think there were some people that were ready to kick our ass. But
well, here he comes.
Uh-oh.
El Condor in the house. What up, brah? What up, gangsta?
Check out the website. We got mugs. We got stickers. We got T-shirts. We got pajamas. We got sweatshirts.
Electric chairs.
Keychains.
Alice Cooper rules. Alice Cooper.
Have I said that?
No, you didn't.
Alice Cooper rules.
There you go.
Woo! Let me mess with the coop.
Yeah, that's good. Great
Thanks,
job,
brah.
Fantastic. All right. There he goes.
Another thrilling endorsement from El Condor.
Yes.
Well, I mean, this show just wouldn't be the same without that cat, man.
No, it's like when
he's our
Bud
Larry
Melman would come out.
That's so fun. I was just about to say that, dude. I was just gonna say that.
Fantastic.
Yeah, Bud Melman from the fucking Late Show.
So Dennis was just really set on the theatric thing, and as they went along those early years, and I believe that's why John Tatum got out of it, is he was just like, this is too much. Like I could see a point. If I'm a musician, I want to just rock and not stop a song to do some goofy theatrical thing. But that was they really expanded your rock show now.
Yeah.
Where most rock bands realize, okay, we can't just come out and not move. And, so really all your explosions and you're running around, and you can go back to Alice Cooper. This was before Kiss, and, Kiss took it to a whole other level, but certainly not before seeing Alice Cooper Group.
Oh, Kiss. I mean, I specifically remember, we're both Kiss nuts, and we got to mention them in every episode. And I've got a Dress to Kill poster right over my head if you guys could see the video here. But they, one of those bios or documentaries, they said, they all loved Alice Cooper. They're like, let's make a band with 4 Alice Coopers.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
So they were the direct spawn of Alice Cooper.
Yeah.
For sure. But anyways, I do want to go over. Well, they eventually moved to LA. They changed their name one more time. I want to go through the name changes and why they changed their name each time. And this is something you also see in the band histories. Um,
They
Pink
were the
Floyd.
Nas for a long time.
Yeah. So and we talked about this with the Pink Floyd episode. They had to change their name for the same reason, is they run across another band with the same name. And so first they were the Earwigs. They changed that name. They could have kept because nobody else is going to call their band the Earwigs. But they get this gig at this really popular club, and the guy running the club is like, "Yeah, I don't like the Earwigs. That's too weird. Why don't you call yourself the Spiders?" So they change their name to the Spiders, and then they eventually find out there's a Japanese band called the Spiders, spelled Spyder. And
It's funny you say that, SPY. Anton Fig was in a band early 80, and they were either called Spider or Spiders. And
what, SPY?
Yeah, and it was Anton Fig, and they did they did a song called "You Better Be Good to Me," and Tina Turner covered that.
Well, there you go. Anton Fig, who played drums on the Ace Frehley solo album. He played drums on Dynasty and Unmasked. So back to Kiss again.
But yeah, anyway, if you track through Anton Fig, he was in some band called Spider. My dad had the record.
He was also the drummer for David Letterman's band.
Yeah.
So back to David Letterman again. But anyways, so they're the Spiders for a while. This Japanese band is called the Spiders. They find out, so they're like, we got to come up with a new name. They're like, let's call ourselves the Nas. Nobody will ever name a band the Nas. And so they're the Nas.
That's a Yardbirds song, by the way.
Oh, is it? Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're the Nas for a while, and then they move out to LA as the Nas, and then Todd Rundgren comes out with a band called the Nas. And they're like, fuck. And so they're trying to figure out what to call themselves, and Vince Fernier basically suggests, what about Alice Cooper? He was thinking like Lizzie Borden, and there actually was a cheese metal band that named themselves Lizzie Borden in the 80s.
Yeah.
But it's this story of this innocent looking girl who turns out to be an axe murderer. And so he didn't want to go right with Lizzie Borden, but he just had invented this character, Alice Cooper, which originally was this innocent little girl who was an axe murderer. And it took a while, but Dennis said when he suggested it to his parents, and they were horrified that they were going to name the band a girl's name, because then that might make people, question his sexuality or whatever.
Yeah,
he saw how horrified they were. He was like, yes, that's definitely the name we got to go with.
Yeah. And one thing we got to point out here is, Vince did come up with Alice Cooper, but from the start, it was the name of the band.
The name of the band, and the singer was still named Vince. Yeah.
Specifically him.
Yeah. And so the band becomes Alice Cooper, and they start playing. They're playing in LA for a while, and they lived in one of the houses they lived in was right by this turnpike on the highway. So these semi trucks would come barreling towards Dennis's bedroom window, and then turn at the last minute. So that had to be fucking nerve wracking.
Oh, and they didn't sleep. It was nonstop traffic.
Yeah. And then they eventually move out to Topanga Canyon, and somewhere along the way, they meet this girl group called the GTOs, which is Girls Together, or I forget what it stands for.
Yeah,
Girls Together Organized or something. They were
groupies and hangers on for a lot of the bands. But
yeah.
Even when they moved to Topanga, they had a lot of groupies, no money, no food, really no reason for these girls to.
You got to realize it was the free love era.
Yeah.
So there's all these just hippie chicks that just want to
But
fuck.
through these women, several bands got signed or picked up solely on the women going to people that they knew, going, "Hey, you got to check these guys out."
Well, the the GTOs were very tight with Frank Zappa.
Yeah,
and
that's my point. These girls.
Yeah, and so basically, eventually, and they're dating some of these girls. I think Vince/Alice was specifically dating one of them, and they were just they're gigging and gigging and gigging, and they opened for Led Zeppelin at a club when Zeppelin first came out.
Liv Tyler's mother was one of these groupies that were banging.
There you go.
The Alice Cooper group and stuff.
And they opened for Pink Floyd on Syd Barrett's last tour, and that Pink Floyd actually stayed at their house. He says he remembers Roger Waters opening the refrigerator and laughing because there's like one can of beer and an open can of beer and a stale piece of bread in the fridge.
Yeah, fucking ketchup packet in the butter dish.
And Syd Barrett's just sitting over in the corner looking at the wall, like not interacting with anybody. And they made friends with the Doors. Jim Morrison became really good friends with Glenn Buxton.
Mm-hmm.
Doors came over and had a seance at their house in Topanga Canyon. And that house was like kind of crooked. It was like, it wasn't.
Yeah, like on a cliff.
On a hill or something. It wasn't completely level. So the whole house is fucking crooked. It just fits with the whole Alice Cooper mythos. But basically, they're starving. They're not really catching on. They know all these famous people, David Crosby and all these people, but they're not catching on. And they have this one, for example, they have this one meeting with this record executive, and they go in and it's like some, Italian, almost mafia boss kind of guy. And they come in off the hot street, and it's this old office building, really cold air conditioning. And they get led into the room, and they had basically mailed this guy a tape of their music, or I think they brought it with them.
They brought a tape with them.
Yeah, they come in, they put the tape in the player, and they're sitting there for 20 minutes listening to the music, and this guy's big suit and a chomping cigar guy behind the desk, and he's just listening in complete silence, and then the music ends, and he doesn't say anything, and they're like, so what did you think of the music? And he goes, the music? What did I think of the music? And he takes the tape and starts spooling the tape out of the cassette and lights it on fire and throws it in the trash can.
And this is back when you didn't just have multiple copies of
no, that was they made that tape specifically for that meeting, and that was the only copy.
Yeah. Probably an early version of Fields of Regret on there,
the stuff off of Pretty's for You, for sure. Yeah. And so so they're just desperate. Finally, Alice asks the chick he's dating, can you please get us an audition with Frank, and out of sympathy, she didn't want to constantly be bothering Frank with stuff like this, but out of sympathy,
Alice is sitting there with Moon Zappa as a baby. They're like babysitting.
Yeah, they would hang out over there. Yeah, they were part of the scene. Babysitting Moon Unit Zappa.
Can you get me some time with the boss?
Yeah, and so finally she relents and asks him, and he's like, "Yeah, sure. Tell him to come up." There's different versions of this story. It's either 7:00 or 9:00, but it's basically tell him to come over for this conversation. We'll just say it was 7. Tell him to come over at 7:00 tomorrow, and they can set up and play for me. And so the next morning, crack of dawn, they show up, knock on the door, and they come. She lets him in, and Frank Zappa comes out of his bedroom, and he's just hair all fucking messed up, probably pillowcase creases on his face. He's like, what the fuck are you guys doing here? And they said, you said show up at 7. And he said, not 7 a.m.
PM, motherfucker.
But it was too late. So, you know, the girlfriend goes and makes Frank a cup of coffee. He's like, all right, well, you're here. Just let's hear it. So they set up and they play and run through their set. And they were doing really weird experimental shit. You know, it was which would freak out some old square dude in a suit, but it was right up Frank Zappa's alley. He's like, this is some weird shit. I think one of the things he said after they were done playing was, I can't even get my band to play some of this shit.
Yeah, and they hit it off because Glenn Buxton was into some experimental guy that would literally cut up tape and run it all back together. Somebody that Frank Zappa was actually really into as well. And I think some of the more obscure experimental people like that.
Karl Heinz. That was
yes.
Karl Heinz Stockhausen. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think Frank didn't expect anyone else to know who the guy was.
Yeah. Yeah. That put them on the hip list with Frank. He's like, oh, you know who Karl Heinz Stockhausen is?
Yeah, and I honestly, I really think there are things that you might stumble onto saying, and you're going to instantly get pounced on where you make that connection and you form a bond like instantly.
Well, that's like when we were in high school. And one of us, when we first met, and I forget how, one of us mentioned Kiss. Like you had a
and here we are.
You had a cassette with yours, and in the early '80s, liking Kiss was not cool, man.
If I had only kept that tape to myself,
I think you had a little cassette of Asylum or some lame '80s.
No, it would have been an older one, dude. No way.
Yeah. Dude, you lent me your Crazy Nights cassette. You were buying all that shit.
Yeah, I was going in order though. So if it
right, it would have been an early one.
Yeah, okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Anyways, so they get signed to Frank Zappa's Straight Records, and that just gave him complete artistic freedom, which was a blessing and a curse, it turns out. But one of the things that Frank said was, you cats need to get a manager. And I forget, how did they meet Shep and Shep Gordon and Joe Greenberg?
They kind of found them. So I don't know. It seems like when Shep and Mo came in,
Joe,
I think of Three Stooges. When those two came in, the way the book reads is they found them and just really pitched to them, and they went to work right away. Now they could have easily been con artists trying to get, but they actually, I think, were crucial, and they never stabbed them in the back per se.
Well, where they lucked out, there were these two pretty savvy guys who wanted to manage bands, but they didn't really have anybody, so they were just as hungry as the Cats and Alice Cooper were.
Yeah,
and it was a perfect match. And Shep Gordon still manages Alice to this day.
Yeah. So it's pretty impressive.
And go ahead.
That first album that Frank produces, he had like some stomach virus going on, so he kept in and out of the studio.
He agreed, he signed them to his label and he agreed to produce the album, but it sounds like he didn't really give it his 100%. He kind of phoned it in, and had a stomach virus and was in and out of the studio. And said one of the things he said, I want it to sound raw. I want it to sound like y'all are playing in a garage and I'm driving by in my car. which is an odd thing to say.
I mean,
But
I get his thought of like just a raw organic thing. So you get 13 songs on that first album, a lot of filler. It's like out of 13 songs, they maybe had 6 or 7 legit songs.
yeah, there's a couple rockers on there, but there's a lot of weird shit. There's a good and couple live albums, semi bootlegs
Mimic
on
the Whiskey has some good stuff
on Spotify that's got a lot of this stuff live and some other weird shit they were playing back then that didn't even make it onto albums. But and you've got a little like on that live album they play BB on Mars, and Alice Cooper goes, "This song is called BB on Mars. It's about a BB on Mars."
Yeah.
Just fucking kick
into
just weird
into it.
But Fields of Regrets is really rocking.
Levity Ball, Reflected, which would be reworked into Elected.
Yeah, Reflected is there's a pretty rocking version of Sing Low Sweet Cheerio on one of those live albums.
Yeah, that's track 3 on the album.
Yeah, on Pretty's for You.
And I always like Changing Arranging. That's the last song on there.
Yeah. So it's hit and miss. It's not as solid as the later albums, but it's worth if you're a completist nut like we are, it's worth giving this stuff a listen. And then
And I would say this first album is far superior to Easy Action, but I will say Easy Action has about 5 solid tracks on it that are worth having.
And so this one has a song called Earwigs to Eternity, which is basically a nod to their first band name. And then on Easy Action they got a song called Return of the Spiders, so they kind of they're giving a little wink to their history there. But it's an interesting album. Of course, it doesn't go anywhere. I think when Lester Bangs reviewed it, he said this album is not worth the plastic it's printed on. That was his review.
And like a lot of bands, their first album is either amazing, like Van Halen 1, or just a complete. You have to start somewhere.
Yeah, at least they didn't do like a series of albums that they wouldn't even acknowledge, like Pantera. So
yeah.
But they did get off to a slow start here. Another thing that happens, I think it's when they're in Topanga Canyon, that was very significant, is Glenn got a pet snake. Her name was Kachina. She was a boa constrictor, and he would let her hang out on a little hat rack on his wall. Eventually somebody comes up with the idea, hey, let's put Kachina in the show. And so then Alice starts walking around with a snake, and that became a just seminal iconography of the Alice Cooper character that they slowly developed.
And that's so in the band, they were the Alice Cooper band, and then they would do these theatrics on stage where they would kill the singer, and then slowly Vince becomes Alice Cooper, this character that just slowly forms with more and more of these demented I Love the Dead type songs,
Yeah, and basically the kind of history
shock
of that
horror, Vincent Price type stuff.
The history of that was when they would do covers. This is something Dennis noticed. When they would do covers, if they were doing a Stones cover, Vince would totally embody Mick Jagger and just be prancing around like Mick Jagger while they're singing Satisfaction or whatever. If they're doing a Yardbirds cover, suddenly he's Keith Relf completely. But when they started doing originals, Vince didn't really have that same pizzazz, to the point where sometimes he'd just be he'd be facing the drummer while he was singing. Yeah. So Dennis was like, why don't you start acting out the songs? think about the lyrics and act out the songs. And he started doing that.
And I think a lot of lead singers do that. I know,
Yeah.
bizarrely, when you had a band and I told you one thing to help you remember the lyrics is to have a story, and you kind of take on that identity of that song, much the way Bon Scott would with some of his songs. So it's perfect advice.
Bon Scott was a master. Go back and listen to our Bon Scott episode if you haven't. He was a fucking master. So basically, through this idea of acting out the songs, he got his confidence back as a frontman, and then they slowly, as the songs got more weird and twisted and strange, this Alice Cooper character kind of starts developing. And I think we'll skip ahead here a little bit since we're on the subject, and then we'll come back to this era. But fast forward a couple years, and they're playing in New York, and Dennis Dunaway sees a poster of it's like a movie about a clown or something. It had something to do with a clown, and this clown.
They're looking out the window of their shared hotel room.
Yeah,
and there was a play or something, and this clown had this stuff on his eyes,
basically like little black flower makeup around his eyes. Yeah,
but you could see it all the way up to their
hotel room. And he was like, that's badass. And they all go down there and they get a close-up look of the poster. And then they go back up and they sit Vince down, and they do the black stuff around his eyes for the very first time. And at first Vince was like, I don't know if this will work for the stage, but I might just do this every day. This looks kind of cool. And then, that became the Alice Cooper makeup that inspired Kiss and everybody else down the line. But the act is starting to come together with the snake and some other things. These mock executions and electric chairs are slowly developing. They can never really develop a following in LA, and at some point they hit the road. I think this is after Easy Action. Let's talk about Easy Action for a second.
Easy Action comes out, was even less produced. They were just kind of kids playing in the studio without any supervision.
Yeah, some guy named David Briggs produced it.
Yeah, but even less attention as they're going through stuff, and they're new to the whole scene, so they're not really sure what they're doing either. So they make this second album, and again, it's got about 5 or 6 pretty solid songs.
Below Your Means is rocking.
I like Mr. and Misdemeanor, Shoe Salesman.
Yeah.
Below Your Means, Refrigerator Heaven was kind of funny. Beautiful Flyaway I like a lot. So those are the ones I dig. So that's most of side 1 and about half of side 2.
There's some decent shit in there, yeah.
So, but like if you were to take those 6 and put them with the other ones, you'd have a solid single record.
For you cats who check out the playlist that Silky makes, he's got some tracks from these albums on the playlist for tonight's episode. So
and while we're talking about these two, years later, years and years, all the way to the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction, Dennis is sitting next to the table next to him.
Oh yeah,
Michael J. Fox.
Yeah.
And somehow he engages Fox, and Fox says, I know every guitar part to
produce for you.
Easy Action.
Yeah, he said, the only reason I'm here is to see you guys get inducted.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. That's a hip credit to a pretty square cat. I always thought of Michael J. Fox
up quite
Yeah,
a bit in mind.
I would have thought he'd have been into like Duran and shit like that. So,
But in Back to the Future, he does give Eddie Van Halen a nod. So it's
yeah, that's true.
hard
Yeah.
to. He might be a closet rocker.
Well, definitely if he
Clearly.
knows all the guitar parts off of Pretty for
Yeah.
You. I mean,
Yeah,
that's
not everybody.
really fucking impressive.
Yeah.
So I probably can't play him now. It's probably a little shaky, but
Probably a little shaky.
Yeah. So let's see here. So they never really develop a following in LA. So they decide to hit the road, and you know, they gotta tour the country to sell these albums anyways. But they decided, you know, the first city where we get a standing ovation, because they would piss off audience. There's a really funny story of their first big gig after signing with Frank Zappa in LA and signing with their new management. They have this big gig at this local club, and when they take the stage, it's packed. And by the time they're done playing, it's completely empty. They just cleared the fucking club. And Frank Zappa was seen laughing, walking out the door.
Yeah. That's rough business.
They're getting a lot of, and there was a lot of, you know, rednecks would get freaked out because they're called Alice Cooper and they have long hair, and it's like the New York Dolls thing, you know.
Well,
there's
and
a little bit of that.
So this is, you know, 1970, late 60s, 1970, and there was such an anti-gay thing, but so many guys were growing their hair out. The Beatles had long hair, all that kind of thing. So it's just interesting that just having a name Alice Cooper would bring out such vile animosity.
One of the main axes to grind that rednecks had about hippies was, what are you? You know, you look like a girl.
Long
what are
hair,
you doing?
Yeah.
So so they were, you know, they were always getting shit from people while they were playing and touring, and they end up playing this gig, first of many, with MC5 and the Stooges in Detroit, and they're just balls out rocking some of these tunes we were mentioning from the first two albums, and the Detroit crowd just went fucking nuts. They were like, and you know, they have this weird theatrics and just fucking and just giving it their all. And Detroit loves bands that do that. That's why Kiss Alive, you know, that gig at Cobo Hall was such an iconic gig for Kiss. They just love bands that go out and just blast the fuck out of you, you know, just rip your face off.
And realistically, they had been playing together since 64. So by the time they were on stage in 69 in Detroit, I think
they were tuned. They were well honed. Yeah.
They were, you know.
But they didn't quite have the hit songwriting, but they had some rockers and they could rock them. And,
and even a blind guy can figure out what works on stage, what doesn't. So, you know, some of the gigs out in LA, they're still trying to figure things out. And once you're on the road, you're like, all right, we got to tighten up. And, you know, and so I think, you know, the planets were in line for them, you know.
And the one of the things, they're playing a festival outside of Detroit around this time called the Saugatuck Pop Festival. And during this performance, a bunch of the crowd is just going fucking nuts, throwing shit at them. This isn't the Detroit crowd. This is a different. I think this is one where there were a bunch of bikers riding their motorcycles around. They saw some guy getting dragged down a hill behind a motorcycle, and, you know, just all kinds of crazy shit. The crowd's throwing shit at him, and Glenn Buxton gets hit in the knee with a fucking hammer. And so
everywhere.
So they stop playing. They're trying to get, and right after Glenn gets hit in the knee, then the stage starts to collapse. Like, you know.
Yeah, they get off the stage and the whole thing just goes to the ground. So
yeah,
I mean, and honestly, I think they might have been torn apart.
They could have died at that one, and
Altamont all over again.
They're all packed in the station wagon trying to get out. People are attacking the car, and there's these guys blocking the gate, and the driver's like, buckle in, boys, and just fucking floors it and just starts driving right at these fuckers who are trying to, and they jump out of the way and they burst through the gate and they get out of there.
These redneck bikers want to kill everybody.
Yeah. And another funny thing from that era is, they get this ranch house and kind of outside of Detroit that they're living in, and they have a pet monkey. His name is Otto Fellatio. Otto spelled O-T-T-O, but the reason they named him Otto Fellatio is because the monkey could suck its own dick.
And we do it all the time. So
guests would come over and they'd be like, "Is that monkey doing what I think it's
a hell of a thing to see?" Jesus.
I remember when I read that part in the book, I was like, Brett, wait till you hear about the pet monkey.
Yeah. I kept waiting for the monkey actually, but that's just hysterical.
Fucking hilarious.
But they really hit pay dirt with the next album. It's like they took the gloves off and actually really applied the talent. I just feel like the songwriting, everything came together for the next really only 3 years.
And the key element in that is, so they're playing a gig in New York. Well, the key element in that is that their management team and the band themselves, they're like, we gotta learn how to write some hits.
Yeah, we gotta do something.
They were like, who do we like? And this makes me want to go. I actually made a Guess Who playlist because I've never really.
They were great.
I've never really listened to the Guess Who. So, but they were like, we really like the Guess Who. They write a lot of rockin' hits, but they're still rocking, And so they the management team starts bugging the Guess Who's producer, and he's like, I don't know. He sends his protege out, this kid named Bob Ezrin, who's been working on these Guess Who albums, as a assistant to the producer or junior producer or whatever. Bob Ezrin goes out to New York. They're playing a gig in New York, and he's just blown away by the theatrics and the energy and everything. He's like, holy shit, this is the future of rock and roll. Comes into their dressing rooms like, I really want to produce you guys. And they didn't know that their management had been nagging these people to send someone out. So this is kind of out of the blue for the band. And Bob Ezrin's pretty young. He's like their age. And they're like, So they don't really take it that seriously. But it gets arranged for Bob Ezrin to come and produce their next album. And this wasn't in the book, but it was in one of these documentaries I saw. I remember specifically this exchange where Bob Ezrin's helping them shape some of these songs, and they're used to doing this wackadoodle off the wall shit, just noodling around and wild lyrics, and he's helping them shape some of these songs. And like, for example, I'm 18, which Bob Ezrin, they were playing a version of that live when Bob Ezrin went and saw them. He thought it was called I'm Edgy. He's like, let's do I'm Edgy. But it started out with this long keyboard solo, and it was this kind of art rock version. And he's helping them shape it. And let's just start it out with the, something catchy and get right into it. And one of them said, well, that's not Alice Cooper. And Bob Ezrin was like, nobody knows who Alice Cooper is yet.
Yeah.
We can still decide what Alice Cooper sounds like.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that got them on board. They're like, oh yeah, that's true. No, it's like us when we fuck up in the podcast. We're like, well, nobody's listening, so it doesn't matter.
But I'm 18 becomes their first single, and it is still all these years later that comes on, and you're like, fuck, listen to that. And that's Glenn Buxton. His guitar work just really shaped the
a killer song. And that whole album is great. We got to talk about it. Hold on, let me.
Yeah, I think that's my favorite record, start to finish. Love It to Death.
Love It to Death is a really good fucking album. Um, we get the track listing up here. Starts with "Caught in a Dream," which I'm thinking we should call this episode "Caught in a Dream: Strange Tales of the Alice Cooper Group." What do you think?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah. So, "Caught in a Dream" is a great song written by Michael Bruce. "I'm 18." That's a song written basically by all the other members except I know Bruce co-wrote that too. That was written by the group. "Long Way to Go" is a rocking song. That's a deep cut, but man,
but it's so
good. Still have a long way to go.
And Black Juju.
That's a wild one.
Be Thy Name. Is It My Body? I love that song.
Is It My Body is a fucking killer song. And that was so here's the story behind that one. Michael Bruce was basically the stud of the group. They were all getting trim, they're all getting their fair share of trim because they're in a decent band. It's the summer, free love era. But Michael Bruce was apparently he was just laying the most cable of anybody. And so he got to the point where he started feeling bad, like these girls didn't like him for who he was.
Right.
So he wrote this song. That's Michael Bruce's lyric. Is it my body? Something I might be. What is it about me? And and then Alice Cooper added the lines, "Have you got the time to find out who I really am?" I love singing those songs.
That's great shit, man.
And then and then
Ballad of Dwight Fry, I think, is my favorite, and it goes right into "Sun Arise," which is a cover. I didn't realize, but just what an odd at that time, 70, 71, people really were into that old Hollywood. They knew all these old musicals and stuff, and it just really shaped their love of West Side Story and that kind of thing. Really shaped their whole theatricality. They knew all this stuff.
Yeah,
they knew these old standards. I've still never heard the original Sunrise, but I love I only want to hear Alice Cooper singing that.
And so they released this album, and then there's the whole scene where they first hear it on the radio, and everybody's gathering around the radio, and then it started getting played on this one station, and I think it was New York or Detroit, and they had all their girlfriends, all their roadies, everybody's just constantly calling the station and requesting it, to the point where every fifth song is "I'm 18" again.
Mm-hmm.
And that song was a huge influence, believe it or not, on the Sex Pistols. They loved Alice Cooper. Yeah. And there's actually, specifically that song, when they first got together, they would jam that song all the time.
Oh,
and cool. There's a quote, I think it's in Super Duper Alice Cooper, where Johnny Rotten is being interviewed, and they're like, someone's saying, "What do you think of you replacing all these dinosaurs like Alice Cooper?" And he goes, "We love Alice Cooper. We don't ever want to replace Alice. We want to maybe compliment Alice Cooper, but I love everything he's ever done." So he was a huge influence on the punk movement as well.
Oh, absolutely.
And all this theatrics, since we're talking about punk, all these theatrics, I mean, most of the choices they made were, well, what's going to piss off the parents the most?
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. So that was a very punk attitude for sure.
What's interesting is, these guys started in high school. They were brothers. They lived together. They lived together almost the entire length of the band itself. They actually shared.
They had these big band
down right down the hall. All these, you would think
houses.
You would think that years together like that bond, that brotherhood, the loyalty would have superseded anything else.
Well, we'll get to that, but we got to talk about the albums.
Yeah.
So
well, I'm just saying it like for a good stretch is why these albums are so
because
solid,
they were like a fist.
because
They were a
yeah,
unit. Yeah.
just epic and really Love It to Death all the way to Muscle Love. They're just such a run, very much like the Van Halen albums. Just
Oh
every
yeah.
album is
Yep.
just solid. There's not
Yep.
a
And
nothing wasted.
some of the new expanded editions have basically a live album's worth of live
Yeah,
performances
from that tour,
from that era, and those I know Billion Dollar Babies, and I think it might be Schools Out, one of those other
goes
ones.
out.
Yeah, between the two of them, it's like 20 live songs from that era, and they are phenomenal. And they're jamming these long versions of the songs like the Allman Brothers. I mean,
Yeah,
it's worth checking out because it's different and it's just high energy. You just imagine seeing that version of the band at that era would have
Oh
been
yeah.
phenomenal. But so let's talk about Killer.
Yeah, Killer comes out 71. Basically, Love It to Death at the beginning. Killer comes out November of 71.
Yeah, and that one has the snake. Glenn Buxton's snake Kachina is on the cover, and it just starts off again. And this is a lot of this is Michael Bruce. He's a great songwriter. Under My Wheels.
Love that song.
That's Michael Bruce with some of the other guys. Bob Ezrin contributes to that one a little bit. Be My Lover, fucking great fucking song.
Insane. So good.
Yep. Halo of Flies, getting into the weird shit again, you know?
Yeah, and they really rocked that. It's like 8.5 minutes long.
Yep.
Great song.
And then a classic, Desperado. Fucking classic. That's like that song reminds me of the cover of the album the most for some reason. It's just this.
Oh yeah. You drive me nervous. Every song on here is phenomenal.
Yeah. And then the classic Dead Babies. That was the one when my friend Arthur got this on 8-track. That was the one that he was just. He's like, you're not gonna believe the shit they're singing about, dude. There's a song called "Dead Babies."
Yeah,
he started singing it to me over the phone. I was like, I gotta go buy that. I gotta go get it.
When you were asking me my early memories, I really think it was this album, and just hearing Dead Babies and my childhood was like growing up in the damn Manson family is just so much. So many things that were inappropriate for a young kid to see.
Yeah.
And here's, Dead Babies playing through the house. It was, you were intrigued. You were trying to figure life out, and I knew my situation was not good because I would go to school and see these kids that thought everything was wonderful. And
right.
Like, this is, so, but I mean, I love these songs. They were,
hey man, it was a twisted soundtrack to a twisted childhood.
Yeah. So. But these songs were actually little, pieces of protection that you formed together as a shield as you got older that kept you, from all the bullshit,
Yeah. So. And then it ends with Killer, which is fucking killer tune.
That's 40 minutes of just solid rock and roll.
Yeah.
You couldn't beat it.
And I love that album. That one and Muscle Love are probably my two favorites, but it didn't have a hit like 18. Like those great songs we were mentioning are kind of FM radio staples at the time, probably, but wasn't a breakout hit where everybody in the country hears it. So the next album, they're like, we gotta, let's try to write another song like I'm 18. And they come out with fucking Schools Out, which is just a barn burner of a song.
Well, then you take a lesson from Chuck Berry, where he wrote songs aimed at his fans who were teenagers. And to this day, School Days and Sweet 16, those are all still relatable.
Shit that kids could relate to. Yeah, for sure.
It's fucking amazing. But
And so
the cool thing when School's Out came out, they put like pink panties around the record.
yeah, and then the record unfolded to it would unfold to like a school desk, and it had the band member names or initials carved into it, and it was
this is the classic school desk that you had to wedge your damn knees up under.
Yeah,
and the hard wood that you could carve like fart into the wood, and it would be there for the rest of the
right.
This shit like that was.
I remember writing. I've told this before, but since we're on the subject, I'm in high school, and I write, "You are a fool, but that's cool. It's all right." From Voodoo by
Black Sabbath,
and you're in a different classroom for an hour each day, so like 5 other people sat at that desk.
Yeah,
and I see in girls' handwriting the next day, what does that even mean?
Oh my god!
So, well, you're obviously not as cool as I am.
Yeah, you're one of those people.
Go back and listen to your fucking Duran Duran. I don't need it. So School's Out's an amazing song. The whole band contributes to that one songwriting wise, and they just knock it out of the park.
It is an epic song. It spearheaded. I mean, I can remember every single beginning of the summer, that song would be all over the radio because the kids were getting out of school.
Yeah, and the best use of that in any film whatsoever is Dazed and Confused when School's Out and it fucking kicks in and every kid's running out down the hallway and
throwing all their papers out of their locker, which we did. We did that shit.
Oh, hell yeah. Can't salute you. Can't find a flag if that don't suit you. That's a drag. All right. Great so, shit. Honestly, that's a killer song. And of these classic albums, in my opinion, this is the weakest one. It's got one of the best songs, but you got Looney Tune, which is okay. Gutter Cat versus the Jets, which is
this is all them kind of nodding to West Side Story.
Yeah, I know.
To me, I would never do that.
Yeah, it's not as solid a rockin' album as the first two, or the next two. But
Public Animal number 9, Alma Mater, I like that one a lot.
Yeah, Public Animal number 9, I think rocks. I think My Stars is pretty good. I heard a live version of that on the expanded edition. It made me go back and reconsider the studio version. It's a pretty good song. But again, it's got School's Out, which was a home run, out of the ballpark grand slam hit for them. It just fucking destroyed. And so and they're just, this is back when, nowadays bands will take 5-6 years between albums. This is back when you were, the albums was how you made your money. Not tours,
album
or
tour.
So you got to keep cranking out the albums, and
I think that kind of schedule killed these bands.
Oh yeah, that's why a lot of them burned out.
Every amazing band in the 70s, gone by 1980.
Yeah, probably had something to do with it. But they made the most of it here. They follow up School's Out with an amazing, great album, $1 Billion Babies.
Oh yeah.
And
this is like their version. Bob Ezrin again, Destroyer, the height of where Kiss had reached to that point.
I never thought about that. Yeah, this is their most produced Bob Ezrin album for sure. It's got his fingerprints all over it, but it's a good one. Yeah,
this one is a good one. I debate Destroyer, but
a lot of people debate Destroyer, but it's got some unarguable classics on it.
Oh, iconic, for sure. Yeah.
So Hello Hooray, I guess that's a cover, apparently.
Yeah, did not know that.
Me either.
Don't want to
hear the only Alice Cooper band could get away with Raped and Freezin', which is the next song. Elected, which is a great song. The theme of Billion Dollar Babies was, they were starting to experience some of the perks, especially after School's Out was a mega hit, of being rich and famous and spoiled rock stars.
Yeah, and they had moved into a mansion at this point owned by someone else, and they were all staying there
in New York State, and they were riding around in limos, and so they decided to do an album about they consider themselves $billion babies at that point for a minute, and so they did this album about being rich and rich spoiled rock star. And then they worked in politicians too, because if you're talking about rich and spoiled people, you got to include them. And it was an election year, so Elected, or the election was coming up. Elected, and then $billion Babies. Let's see, what year was this? 73. Yeah, so they're probably recording it during the 72.
Yeah.
Fear and Loathing on the Campaign Trail 72. Yeah. So they do Elected, and then $1 Billion Babies, great fucking song. Unfinished Suite, which is okay. No More Mr. Nice Guy, fucking killer song.
Yeah, it just and Generation Landslide, bro. They just kill you with the back-to-back side too.
And Generation Landslide, Bob Dylan really admired the lyrics to that. He cited in an interview, he said,
"What a compliment to have Bob Dylan like your song."
And if you listen to it, it sounds kind of Dylan-esque, actually, the lyrics.
I was Things.
Sick Things is good, yeah.
I love the piano. Marianne is just so you really see the talent in the band, and it's not so much shock horror androgyny. Right. Here's just a solid, beautiful piece of music.
And then I Love the Dead, and you can start seeing little previews of Welcome to My Nightmare with I Love the Dead was written only by Alice Cooper and Bob Ezrin.
Yep.
And Sick Things, Bob Ezrin, Alice Cooper, and then Michael Bruce had a little bit to do with it. But those two songs could very easily have been on Welcome to My Nightmare.
Well, and I got to point out here, they had this mansion. They're all living there. They're all basically coming downstairs from their beds. Their beds are still warm, and they're putting their instruments on and working on songs. Meanwhile, Alice Cooper is staying somewhere else and commuting in.
Yeah.
And so he's still hanging out and talking. But I think this is where Bob Ezrin and him are,
going off. And here's the thing too. What's starting to happen now? People are referring to, ask me why the singer's name is Alice. I said, listen, babe, you really wouldn't understand. So they're calling him Alice now, and when they tour, he's the only one getting invited out to interviews. They're back at the hotel banging groupies. They don't really care, but it starts to become Alice Cooper is the focal point. Just a couple other songs that are on the expanded edition. They had a song Coal Black Model T, which also
that's a great song.
Was reworked as Slick Black Limousine. Both of those are on the expanded edition. Son of $1 Billion Babies, which is a kind of a riff on Generation Landslide. It's just it's a good solid album that I think they really rebounded from the School's Out kind of Broadway experimental thing to another a good rockin' album.
I think that paved the way for where Alice wanted to go, is when I was saying he went more theatrical than they had before.
Oh yeah. One of the things that happened around this time, though, Dennis Dunaway and Alice Cooper were really big fans of Salvador Dali going way back, and a lot of their songwriting was influenced by the surrealists,
Fellini-esque.
All that surrealism stuff. And so Dali becomes infatuated with Alice Cooper, and there's this initial meeting where Dennis Dunaway's invited and Alice is there, and they're meeting with Dali, and Dali's going to create this work of art, is one of his famous works of art, which was a hologram of Alice Cooper, the singer, not the whole band.
Yeah.
And so Dennis is with Alice during the initial planning meetings for that. And then when the unveiling happens, it's a big event, big party, a lot of important people are there. Dennis finds out about it later, and only Alice was invited. So that kind of stuff starts happening. And there's one story in the book about where I think it was Neil, the drummer, runs after a show and jumps in the limo, and the driver or one of the roadies or somebody says, "Oh no, this is Alice's limo. You're gonna have to get out."
Oh, actually asked him to get out of the limo.
Yeah.
Let him the fuck off.
It's like, after all we've been through, I'm not getting out of this fucking. Fuck you.
Yeah.
So these differences are starting to happen. The other thing that started happening around the $1 Billion Babies time is Glenn Buxton just starts descending into a drug addiction, and his playing starts to suffer. So starting with $1 Billion Babies, they're bringing in other guitar players to do some of the lead guitar work and on the tour. So Glenn's still in the band, but they're bringing in, and it's the opposite of Iron Maiden, where they bring in a lame guitar player for some reason, Yannick Gers. And in this case, they're bringing in, good guitar players to supplement on the album and on the tour. And Glenn Buxton's starting to really resent this, even though he's addicted to drugs. I think it was like heroin or something, but he was not, or alcohol, but he was not keeping up his end of the playing. And they didn't kick him out. They just started bringing in people to, it's basically not as bad, but when Syd Barrett starts going downhill and they bring in David Gilmour to cover for him, basically.
Right. Yeah.
So they're going back into the studio for the next album, follow up to $1 Billion Babies, which is Muscle of Love. They start, it's assumed that Ezrin is going to produce this one too. They start playing Woman Machine, one of the songs off of there that they're excited about. And immediately before they're even finished with the song, Ezrin stops them and starts making suggestions. And I think the band could sense this thing of Cooper and Ezrin going off and writing songs together. It happened a couple times on the previous album.
Yeah.
And then Ezrin telling them, trying to interfere in songs that they're putting together. And the rest of the band just didn't want to do it anymore. So right in the early part of the recording of that album, Ezrin is basically run off by the rest of the band. They bring in Jack Richardson, who's the senior Guess Who producer guy who they originally wanted, who Ezrin was his protege. They bring in him, and then Jack Douglas, who produced all the classic Aerosmith albums from back in the day. And they, in my opinion, knock out a phenomenal fucking album. I think Killer and this one are the two most solid of the classic. Let's just go through the track listing. Big Apple Dreamin'.
Great
looking
tune.
up at the United Nations. Anyways, I'll try not to sing all these songs for you guys.
Now Snags will randomly break into.
I'm just wacky that way. Yeah.
Exact.
Oh, and then you can't tell. Is it Alice Cooper or is it Snags? You really can't tell. Never Been Sold Before, which is a great tune. Hard Hearted Alice, which is a cool kind of a ballad, and buried in those lyrics is a little bit of kind of Alice is becoming an asshole. Hard Hearted Alice. Crazy Little Child. Working Up a Sweat fucking rocks. Muscle of Love kicks ass.
Yeah, I was always.
Oh
like
man, the guitar riff on that song, holy shit, dude. Man with the Golden Gun. That was actually they were.
Go ahead.
Yeah, you tell the story.
They were gonna actually do the soundtrack for the new James Bond movie, which would have rocked and I think time-wise they couldn't get their stuff
Yeah,
together.
basically they recorded it to submit to the producers as the theme song for the new jam. It would have been perfect theme song. It sounds like it. Sounds like a Bond theme song,
Yeah,
but they didn't make the deadline, and somebody else got it. Teenage Lament is a killer fucking song.
yeah, I
That's
love
an
that.
amazing song. Um, and that was Neil Smith, the drummer, wrote that along with Alice contributing to the lyrics, and then Woman Machine, which is a real rocker, solid rocker. So just a good album through and through, but it didn't sell like Billion Dollar Babies. Billion Dollar Babies was just a big mega hit. And this album just didn't sell the same, and it was initially upon release considered a bit of a failure, and they had alienated Bob Ezrin. And so in Alice's mind, is like, damn, Bob Ezrin produced all these hits from us. Now the band's not getting along with him. And the band members, Michael Bruce was feeling neglected. He was writing all these hit songs for the Alice Cooper group. He's like, why don't I just write an album for myself and I'll be the star?
Yeah, because he had non-Alice Cooper themed type songs. So he's thinking, well, maybe I'll do a solo thing.
So they kind of decided to take a break. Neil Smith does an album. Michael Bruce does an album. And unbeknownst to them, while they're working on, and Dennis Dunaway's helping them with their albums. And unbeknownst to them, Bob Ezrin calls Alice and says, you want to work on a new album? And I guess Alice is thinking, they're doing solo albums. I'm going to do a solo album. And Ezrin and Alice start working on Welcome to My Nightmare. And he's known as Alice Cooper at this time. So he's like, I'm not going to call it anything else. I'm Alice Cooper.
Right. And one thing is Ezrin's not there when it's Alice Cooper, the group. So, Ezrin comes in and it's Alice Cooper and this is Alice Cooper. And so at some point, well, dude, you don't need them. I mean, it just makes sense.
That's a classic story too. Telling the singer he doesn't need the band. It happens all the time.
All the time.
And
maybe Bob Ezrin doesn't realize what he's doing.
Yeah, well, I think he kind of knew. They pissed him off. They ran him off of Muscle of Love. He's going, fuck those guys. And he did tell Alice when they ran him off. He said, "Look, they don't want to work with me. I can see, but if you want to do something, with me again, just let me know. We'll do something together."
Yeah. So I have a story. They have right now. You can order an autographed copy of Muscle of Love, the deluxe edition. So you get the box with the stain that's along the bottom. And there was a famous thing about this Muscle of Love record. The actual record got returned a lot back in the day because it would show up as the new Alice Cooper record, and then it says inside one contains one Alice Cooper Muscle of Love, and here's this stain along the bottom of the record. And so these record stores were returning them, thinking they had damaged product.
It was packaged in a plain brown wrapper like a sex toy would be if you ordered a sex toy.
Right.
And it had a stain on it to make it a little extra sleazy.
Yeah. So anyway, flash forward to today.
Right.
I see this order an autographed copy of Muscle of Love. And this was on Facebook. And you're trying to pull it up to see what's in it. And what's in it is a flyer inside the box that's literally autographed by everyone in the band except for Glenn Buxton. And it's actually autographed by each member of the band. And the album is on also. So you got either pink vinyl or 2 CDs, the album and then that live stuff you were talking about. Right. And then a Blu-ray, which has, they're doing this now where you do the Blu-ray and it's the atmosphere puts you kind of more into the album itself. It sounds real trippy. And I've heard Paranoid this way, Alice Cooper's $1 Billion Babies this way. Really cool to hear it that way. But so I'm looking at this and I'm like, wow, you can get an autograph of the whole band, in this package.
Right.
And so I lose the link on Facebook, because every once in a while Facebook will just update and you lose what you were looking at.
Right.
So it was on talkshop.live was the link. And so I go on to do it. And of course, you see it's all from memory. I'm like talknow.com. So I punch that in and it's some live sex thing.
It's so appropriate for the subject matter of the podcast. Is
on my laptop, and I'm like, oh my God. Because
I got a story for you. But
I'm saying like the wife or the kid's gonna walk in here. I'm looking at this is all over the lab. I'm like, oh my God, trying to shut it down and delete it. But I'm still trying to find this record to see, to then tell you on the show.
Right.
Everything I type brings that site back up.
That's fucking hilarious.
I'm just like, oh my God. You're in this room looking back.
Right. Yeah. That's why you got to have the computer facing the doorway. So when somebody walks in, they see the back of the computer.
And it was so innocent.
Not that I would have any reason,
not that you would ever do that either.
No, of course not. Yeah.
I'm saying I would never go on one of these live chat things, but it was just like, oh my God, get me the fuck
fucking
out.
Hilarious.
So I thought you'd like that story.
So that reminds me of a story. That reminds me of a story of my boss, who shall remain nameless, who the early days of the internet, he's at work and his mom comes to visit him.
Right.
And he's explaining to her what the internet is, right?
Okay.
And one of the businesses that they're in involves a sewer infrastructure and repairing manholes and stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, yeah, I can use it for the business. Like, let's see. Say I want to learn about manholes, let's see. And he types in manhole.com.
Oh, wow.
Hardcore gay porn just starts covering. And his elderly mother's sitting there and he's like, oh, that's not what I was. That's not what.
Wow.
That's before
fantastic.
Search engines were the thing, So,
anyways,
all right. So, back to the dissolution of the Alice Cooper group. So basically, they do their solo albums, which are immediately forgettable, and he does his solo album, which is an instant classic to this day, called "Welcome to My Nightmare."
Yeah, because that was a TV like they worked it out.
They did a whole TV special,
TV show, and so now it's in everyone's living room. Alice Cooper's on the Muppet Show doing "Only Women Bleed."
Yeah.
All these things that the rest of the band could have very much been a part of, and it's a damn shame when you go back to their history of these guys all the way back to high school, and to just step away. I just don't know how. It's like when Elvis was doing his 68 comeback special, and people that knew people asked Scotty Moore to be on the show with DJ Fontana, and here's Elvis seeing his old bandmates. And you'd think he'd go, guys, where you been? Holy, let's do. No, just they did that show, and Scotty Moore never saw Elvis again.
Yeah.
And you're like, God damn, bro, this guy taught you how to play guitar. You guys, I just don't know how you lose that loyalty,
Well, it was lost, although in this case there are some reunions, which we'll get to in a second. Mm-hmm. But initially, Alice Cooper does "Welcome to My Nightmare." I think that's got about 3 good songs on it. It was a hugely successful album, but I think it's kind of like Destroy.
He even made a sequel to it, and each time, like I have everything Alice Cooper's name is on, but there's just so much of the later stuff. You're like, yeah, okay.
Yeah. No, I think
one or two listens.
Welcome to My Nightmare is a killer fucking song. Cold Ethel's a good rocker. Only Women Bleed is a great ballad. And then, Devil's Food is okay. I mean, it just I really those three songs are on my personal Alice Cooper playlist. It's a couple songs from Pretty's for You, a couple from Easy Action, all those classic albums in their entirety.
The five solid.
Yeah. And then those three albums from Welcome to My Nightmare, and then Go to Hell from Alice Cooper Goes to Hell is a great song.
Yeah.
And then You and Me off of Lace and Whiskey is a nice ballad. And then that's it.
I like the song Lace and Whiskey too. I like that.
So I don't, he has maintained, he launched a successful career and they didn't. But nothing like you're saying, like we're both saying here, nothing he's done afterwards has matched those Alice Cooper group albums, because he didn't have Michael Bruce as a songwriter. It's like, why hasn't Guns N' Roses released anything good even since the quote unquote reunion? Because Izzy Stradlin wrote most of those songs on Appetite for Destruction and GNR
what's
Live.
funny is the guys, the egos, they think they're better than where this shit's coming from.
Yeah. And if I'll just go listen to Izzy Stradlin's solo albums, all 10 of them, and they're solid as a fucking rock.
Yeah.
And that's where the songwriting was coming from.
I hate to do this. I really hate to do this. But AC/DC after Bon Scott's gone, like, they got
same thing.
What's going on? Although Power Up is one of the best albums.
Now, the thing about AC/DC, they didn't have the level of songwriting after Bon Scott, but
it's a noticeable difference.
It's a noticeable difference, but it's still solid rock and roll.
Absolutely, and I won't take that from them.
Yeah, my AC/DC playlist has every song they ever fucking recorded.
Yeah,
but it's kind of like the difference. It's kind of like the difference between Ace of Spades and then the later era Motorhead. No, it's not the same level, but it's still Motorhead, and I'm still going to listen to all of it.
Still, the Ramones, it's still recognizable as a bottle of whiskey you bring down from the this is the Ramones.
But Michael Bruce did some solo albums and some session work. Neil Smith, all these guys kind of faded into obscurity, to be honest. Dennis Dunaway and Glenn Buxton go off doing different things. Glenn Buxton spiraled off into addiction for quite a while in the 90s. And this is a really sad story. He kicks his habit. He's living out in the Midwest somewhere in a small town.
Living up in Iowa. And meets this girl in this small town. And
falls in love.
They're going to get married.
Engaged, and then dies in pneumonia. Bam.
But all that drug use weakens your metabolism and your immune system, and
so Alice Cooper Group influences a lot of, just to name a few, Kiss, obviously. Ozzy's solo career is hugely influenced by Alice Cooper, especially the early years where he's wearing eyeliner around his eyes. He's biting the heads off of bats.
Every single LA metal band.
Every single LA metal band. Randy Rhoads was a huge Alice Cooper fan. He wore the snakeskin guitar strap because of Alice Cooper's Snake.
Yeah.
Rob Zombie, obviously. Marilyn Manson, obviously.
But just take a second and think of every single LA metal band.
Sure. Motley Crue, Wasp. Yeah. The New York Dolls and Alice Cooper were probably the two biggest influences. And on that scene, they get inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 2011. they play together. Glenn's already gone, but the rest of the band and Alice, and I forget who was on guitar on that one. But they did.
The guy that played
Steve Hunter.
Yes, thank you.
Guy that played on Welcome to My Nightmare.
Yeah.
And then and they've done a handful of reunion shows. Glenn Buxton and Memorial Weekend, after he passed away, they reunited in Phoenix. 2010, they did a show at the Dodge Theater in Phoenix with Steve Hunter again, filling in. Jägermeister Ice Cold 4D event 2011. They played at London's Battersea Power Station. 2015 was probably the last one. This was in conjunction with the release of this book we've been talking about by Dennis Dunaway. They did a reunion show there called Live from the AstroTurf. That one is on Spotify as a live album. I was 3/4 of the way through that before I realized it was a later era reunion show. I mean, it rocks.
Funny. Yeah.
He starts talking about Trump and Hillary, and I'm like, what? And then I realized, oh shit, this is a reunion show.
Yeah, and they've released that. You can get it on colored vinyl, which, all the kids are into colored vinyl. And it's just a great set. It really is.
Yeah. So check out the playlist. Got a lot of the shit we've been talking about on it, and now you cats know all there is to know about the Alice Cooper group. Yes, it was a fucking group.
One story we missed. The 1969, I believe, Pretties for You is out there. They get tapped to go up to Toronto and play the Toronto Peace Festival.
Yeah,
with John Lennon and Yoko Ono. Chuck Berry was there. A lot of people. Gene Vincent was there, and
it's a great story.
They did a thing where they'd have a pillowcase and have feathers all over the damn stage and stuff. And so they had a pet chicken that was touring around, and it would sit up on the amps on the stage. And at one point, Alice thinks he'll throw this chicken out into the audience and it'll just fly away. And instead, this poor chicken, they even named the chicken. I forgot the chicken.
Yeah, it was literally a pet.
Yeah, it was like they throw Carl out into the audience and he drops like a stone, and the audience rips this chicken apart
and throws his parts back on the stage.
Let's just at the Toronto Peace Festival.
Yeah.
We're in such a frothing frenzy of
because the Alice Cooper group was just,
I guess,
rocking.
I've been to so many concerts.
That just proves our point about hippies.
Yes. I have never in my life, all the metal shows, all the punk shows, never in my life been in such a frenzied state that if they'd thrown an animal at me, I would have tore it to pieces.
Yeah. And so they were harassed by the ASPCA for years afterwards and this is before the internet, before you could really get all the facts. Alice Cooper became the band that rips up chickens in their live show.
Yeah, and early on you might laugh about it and go, yeah, that's what happened, and all you're doing is perpetuating this image. And then later, when you try to go, look, we never did that. Oh, yeah, now you say that, that they're not going to believe. So you're at some point you throw your hands up and be like,
and the other funny part of that show is they were, in addition to playing the show, and they were really out of place there. It was John Lennon, and the only other person who was out of place there was Yoko Ono squawking, but that was just unavoidable. And then it was a bunch of old rock and roll people.
Yeah.
So Gene Vincent and a lot of these other old guys. And so to kind of justify Alice Cooper's participation, they got them to be Gene Vincent's backing band as well.
Yeah. So they meet Gene Vincent before the show, and they actually are, hi, we've We
big
love your
fans.
songs and
And Gene's a little nervous. He hasn't played live in a while, but these seem like nice guys, just wearing t-shirts and jeans. And so they they rehearse with him and they get his set down. And what was supposed to happen was Alice Cooper was going to play, some other bands were going to play, and eventually they'd come back out in their normal clothes and they'd just be his innocuous backing band. Well, the organizers decided before Alice Cooper even goes on, without telling anybody, Gene's going to come out right after Alice Cooper. So they go out and they're in drag and they've got makeup on and they're chopping heads off on their stage show or electric chair, whatever kind of
shit
weirdness
everywhere.
And then they fucking murder this chicken. and
then they tell Gene, all right, get out there, buddy.
Get out there. Oh, by the way, that's your backing band. And he didn't even recognize them. And he's like, holy shit. And he walks out there looking totally freaked out. And they're freaked out because they're like, we didn't know the chicken was going to get murdered. We didn't know you were going to be brought out right now.
Yeah.
And they had to kind of calm Gene Vincent down, and they did it, but it was really fucking awkward. So,
what a story!
Hilarious.
Just the look, and you're talking old school rock and roll, where shaking your hip a little bit caused a furor.
Yeah. And these guys are out there just doing everything.
We just ripped a chicken in half, and I'm wearing a dress that's ripped up, and I got fake blood all over me.
Right, and staged a mock execution, and you know. Anyways, I think that's a perfect image to leave the audience with.
Yes.
Caught in a Dream, Strange Tales of the Alice Cooper Group. We got more shit coming down the pike for you maniacs who waste your time listening to our show. So don't go anywhere. Tune in. Keep tuning in. We'll keep dropping madness on you. Peace out, motherfuckers. Cheers.